100.1 FM and AM 1020 KDKA. It's Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krausey. Talk, listen, and speak to the region's most influential leaders. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krausey.
And welcome in, everyone, to another edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krausey. We thank everybody for tuning in and joining us as we join the program. Some of the audio that you were listening to as we started the program was from Wayne, Michigan, as the UAW workers remain strong and remain solid in that strike against the Big Three in Detroit. UAW President Shawn Fain put a statement out by video, and we'll play some of that audio a little bit later in the program, that the workers are digging in and they are prepared to expand their reach. Of course, we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We also come to you from a city in Pittsburgh where the Post Gazette Strike, or the Post Gazette Workers, rather, remain on strike, approaching now, if you can believe this, 1 full year, going back to October of 2022, when that walkout first took place. Yet they remain steadfast. I saw a story published, I think it was yesterday, regarding ownership of the newspaper now challenging having to pay the Post Gazette worker legal fees. So every move that comes forward where the workers from the Guild get an opportunity to at least see a small victory is met by an appeal by the ownership group. We'll continue to update you on that as well. It's why this program Today in Pittsburgh Labor does exist. We'll also continue to update you on the automotive strike as well over the next couple of weeks as that starts to play out. We are super excited today to have a conversation and focus in on the American Guild of Musical Artists. AGMA, I think, is how it's referred to in terms of an acronym. Patrick McGill is going to join us to kick off the show here today in Pittsburgh Labor. Patrick, welcome into the program. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad you're here, Patrick. Give us, or let the listening audience know the scope of your involvement, your title with AGMA, and what it all means.
Absolutely. So I work at Pittsburgh Opera. I am a chorister there. I've been a chorister for 10 years. I started in 2013 when I was a 21-year-old undergrad student. And I've been working there, working my way up through the union leadership. This Pittsburgh Opera is, of course, a union house. All our singers are represented by AGMA, and we of course have a local committee. That is how I started, and then that committee has led to further involvement in things at our state level. Our union. Over the last couple of years, recently implemented a new constitution that kind of redrew some of the areas for our country, and we now have a Pennsylvania area. We used to just have one that was just Pittsburgh that covered us and Pittsburgh Ballet Theater. We are now a whole Pennsylvania area that includes us in Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, as well as Opera Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Ballet, and recently singers with the Philadelphia Orchestra Chorus, who perform alongside the Philadelphia Orchestra out there. So we now have 5 companies in our area, and I am the chair of the committee that makes up Pennsylvania and has representatives from all 5 companies. We meet about monthly discuss what's going on throughout the state and work together to give each other support and find solutions to problems and create a greater sense of union solidarity.
Patrick, I come to you and I come to the listeners in the western part of the state, broadcasting from the Philadelphia region, where we've spent the last 9 years. We've just transitioned into our 10th year with the Labor Show with J-Doc and Krausey here in the Philadelphia market. So we've been part of that labor landscape, and our goal or our focus is to use the platform to educate the public, because the one thing that I've learned over the first 9 years of doing a 1-hour weekly radio program, talk radio program, is that most time I've learned two things. One, unions do a very, very poor job when it comes to informing the public and touting their own horn about what unions mean to communities. I think it's absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, I would go as far to say that unions shape the real meaning of what happens inside the communities. And I'll put that in context, whether that means coaching your a little league team or a football or a football program, or being involved in community donations for nonprofits, or helping out when tragedy strikes. Whenever a situation or a need arises, the first one standing in line is always the union. I believe that. Sometimes I struggle with why the public doesn't understand that.
No, I fully understand what you were saying there. With the work that I do and the work that I've been involved with, we have tried to make very clear, and I think that there is some appreciation from management on this, that we really care. We really care about Pittsburgh, and we really care about our art forms in this city, and we are invested in the work that we create and in further enhancing the artistic and musical life of our community by creating world-class opera and world-class ballet, world-class singing. We believe that these are things that make Pittsburgh the greatest city on earth, and as well as, of course, for our friends in Philadelphia, that makes their city great as well. We are fully invested in our communities, and therefore we want to create a great workplace for the people in our community so that they have something to be proud of and something to feel invested in.
Let me get your thoughts, your initial thoughts, and we're talking with Patrick McGill, who's kicking us off on today in Pittsburgh Labor. Patrick, let me get a couple of thoughts from you. First, the opening of the show, you hear the reference. You perhaps didn't hear the audio soundbite leading into it, but you certainly heard my short monologue reference to the automotive workers now moving into, when we're recording this broadcast, day 5, and it looks like it could be a while before both sides get to a point where they can settle this. But when you hear that, what first comes into your mind when you see one of your brothers and sisters from a different union having to stand up for their rights, and the only way they can do it is to strike?
It breaks my heart. I think that sometimes there is a false notion that when it comes to union members and organized labor as a whole, that there is this sense that we are a hammer and we see the whole world as a nail, right? We see a problem and we think that the first solution needs to be to strike, and that's not true at all. That is the last solution. That is the last thing that anybody wants to do. The people in the UAW, I'm sure that all they want to do is they want to be able to do their job, and they want to be able to have the financial security and the dignity that should come from doing the great work that they do and creating the automotive industry as we know it. So when they have been pushed to a breaking point, that they feel that they must go on strike, it both breaks my heart to hear that, but it also, when you say, and as I've read in the news as well, that they are fully committed. They have not taken these steps lightly, and they are committed to the needs of their members, and are willing to say and stand up to management and ownership and say, no, what you have offered us is not sufficient. We need what we tell you we need. That gives me, that's very encouraging to me to hear.
We're talking with Patrick McGill, who is the Pennsylvania area chair of AGMA. AGMA is the American Guild of Musical Artists. He's in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a union town. Patrick, one last thought before we take our first commercial break here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. The Post Gazette Workers, who remain with resolve, are continuously under siege from ownership, who clearly just want to bust that union. It's a union of workers that are made up of generations of workers that are part of the Post Gazette. And yet, as we come on the air, we find ourselves just a few weeks out from being on the doorstep of crossing over the 1-year plateau. Amazing for me to have to say that.
It's true. It's truly astounding, and I don't mean that as a compliment. It does boggle the mind that management has been willing to hold out for a year, and if we consider all of the negotiations before that, but longer than a year, withholding a fair deal for the workers of the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. The Post Gazette is one of the prides of this town. It's a great newspaper. It's a great newspaper that delivers the news of this city to the world, certainly in today's digital age, and being able to access it online and things like that. That means that people who are outside of Pittsburgh can know what is happening in Pittsburgh because of the great reporting that is done at the Post Gazette. But the fact that management has not come to a fair deal in all of this time it truly does. It boggles the mind, and it makes you think. And we at AGMA, we certainly support the workers at the Post Gazette, and we hope that they can get a fair deal as soon as they can.
Patrick McGill is our special guest here today. Our opening conversation with Patrick continues after our first break. You're listening to Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Back in a moment. If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428. And back here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor, thank you very much for tuning in and being a part of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Just by the mere fact that you're tuning into the program, we appreciate you being there, and we want to try and always educate the public as best that we can about what it means to be in a union. Patrick McGill is our special guest. Still to come on the other side of our next break, we'll talk to an AGMA member. Now I'm going to throw his name out there and do the best that I can with it, and then he'll correct me when he comes on. But Corey Bourbonniere will join us a little bit later on in the program Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Labor. Patrick, back to you, and thank you again for your time. I was thinking while I was listening to your thoughts about the auto workers, and then, of course, the Post Gazette workers here in Pittsburgh. And I want to frame this out correctly and then give you a chance to elaborate on it. I've said many times over the last 6 months to a year, and maybe 18 months to be fair, never has there been a better time to be a member of a union. Talk about that.
You're absolutely correct about that. This is the best time to be a union member, potentially in all of this country's history. I think part of what helps is that we have a very friendly labor department. From the White House that is supportive. The National Labor Relations Board is very supportive of unions and helping them to organize. One of the things, of course, that I wanted to talk about was how at AGMA, one of our major priorities over that last period of time that you were referring to, the last few years, AGMA has really stepped up its organizing efforts. And when I say that, what I mean is organizing new shops and bringing them into the union fold. Many of these are performing organizations, opera companies, concert choruses, ballet companies, and even church music programs, if you can believe it. These are programs that have existed and companies that have existed sometimes for a while, but are now the workers, the artists who create the art for these entities are now saying, yes, we want union representation. We want the strength and support of the union when we negotiate for better pay raises or better working conditions, or anything of that nature. And it's not being seen as some kind of a burden or something that's overly bureaucratic. It's being seen as, no, this is an asset. This is something that we should want to have. And so we're going to do the work. And my hat's off to all of the folks on staff at AGMA who work tirelessly. It's truly amazing the work that they do. Our business representatives, our staff attorneys, they're doing great things because when more of us are organized, when more of us are represented by a union, that only makes our union stronger and it only makes conditions better. Obviously, of course, at our signatory companies and for those who are represented, but also for those artists who are not represented by us, because people are able to say, well, I could go work at a union house and I could be making better money or have better working conditions, more reasonable hours, things like that then can pressure other groups into improving conditions for their workers. And that's ultimately what we want. We want people to be able to do their work, to practice their craft, to share their art in a way that's equitable and treats them fairly.
One thing that I've learned in coming on weekly and trying to spotlight some of the struggles of those who are on strike that make up the 5 unions that make up the Post Gazette. The one thing that, and I think I even referenced it on this show, was the generational tenure of workers who have been there, many of them, all their life, Mm-hmm. And I say that to set the stage for this, or set the mind for this next statement. What I learned from the Starbucks organizing effort And what I've learned as I've continued to have communication, Patrick, is that more and more today, the younger generation is starting to understand the value of what it means to be in a union, whether it's the utilization of an incredible apprentice program or just the rights that they have, the protection that they have from a union.
Absolutely. When you say that about the generational work at a place like the Post Gazette, I mean, those are the kind of intangible things that you just can't put a dollar amount on. If someone has been covering a certain beat for several years, then they are going to know things. They are going to just have so much institutional knowledge and anecdotal memories and things like that you can't teach that in an onboarding seminar. Those are the things that come from investing in your workers. And we see it, of course, in the work that we do as well. We have several folks who sing with us, who have been singing with us for years and years, and in many cases for decades. And I love getting to sit down and talk with some of the folks in the old guard, and talk about their experiences, hear about what things were like before we were at our present location in the Strip District when the company operated out of downtown. What certain shows were like, what it was like to sing with and perform with an opera singer, like, let's say, like Pavarotti, who passed away before I was ever going to work for the company. They're able to share those experiences, and they take a lot of pride in those shared experiences. And I think that only serves to make the work that we do better. If you think just for a second that if for the sake of argument, if money were no object and companies like this could just bring in ringers and they could just throw money at them to do the work, sure, it'll get done, but it's not going to be the same as when you make the kind of targeted investments that creates security and stability for people, so that they want to invest their lives in not just their work, but in their community and in everything else that they do.
No doubt about that. Patrick McGill joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Just a couple of minutes left, Patrick, and I really appreciate your perspective. Patrick is AGMA's Pennsylvania area chair. He's also the chair of AGMA's committee at the Pittsburgh Opera. His extension comes all the way down the turnpike into Philadelphia as well. So his reach and his effect and his ability to influence is the entire state. We're separated, of course, by, in Philadelphia, the love of the Eagles, in Pittsburgh, the love of the Steelers. But other than that, we stand together in solidarity, and we appreciate, Patrick, you coming on to talk with us. Let me give you the last 90 seconds or so that we have remaining in the segment. To talk more about what your overall mission is. And we touched on it in this interview. We touched on expansion. We touched on reach and frequency and growth of organized labor specific to you and to AGMA. But take that 90 seconds, use it as a platform. And remember, in the context of you're not preaching to the choir, pardon the pun, you're speaking to an audience who may not fully get it.
In union work is to break down barriers and to create bridges. I'm a Pittsburgher. I'm from the city of bridges, and I believe that when we work together, we're able to accomplish more than when we work at separate ends. I believe that everybody is entitled to a fair workplace. And I believe that oftentimes management strategy is to keep people in the dark and to keep people separated and to keep people at cross purposes because that only serves their strength as opposed to our strength. Whatever it is, labor is the force that gets things done. If you want an opera company, you need opera singers, and that's us. If you want a ballet company, you need ballet dancers, and that's us. If you want a car plant, you need auto workers, and that's the UAW. If you want a show on television or a movie, you need writers, and that's the WGA, and you need actors, and that's SAG-AFTRA. What we do is what creates America. It's what creates the world that we live in. And our purpose as a union is to work together to create the best possible world for all of us. We live in a big enough world now where we ought to work together. This country and this economy is so large and so diverse that there are options for all of us. There is enough for labor at the table, but we are only able to accomplish that when we work together, when we talk with our neighbors, when we work with our friends and our brothers and sisters to say, we deserve a fair shake at this. We deserve that good life that we're promised. And this is how we're going to get it.
And I'll add one more to it, Patrick. If you're building a building in the city and you need the building trades will provide and execute that job safely under OSHA regulation and will deliver a product that will far exceed the craftsmanship of somebody who's not as trained as a sprinkler fitter, as a steam fitter, as a boiler maker, as an electrician, as an iron worker. That's just the truth, and that's not being biased. That's just reality.
Indeed. We care about doing it right, and we care about keeping people safe, both our workers working on a job as well as the public that we serve.
Patrick McGill, AGMA's Pennsylvania Area Chair of AGMA's Committee at Pittsburgh Opera, joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Patrick, a real pleasure to spend a few minutes with you today. Continued resolve in your efforts across the state of Pennsylvania. And keep in mind, I'd love to have you join us on the Labor Show down in Philadelphia. I'd love to bring your perspective to the Philadelphia audience as well. Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's good stuff with Patrick McGill. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We'll take a commercial break. Back on the other side. If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428. And back here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor, still to come before we end the broadcast today. I'll play some more audio from the auto worker strike that's happening in Michigan. We'll pick up some sound from the president of the UAW, and we'll finish up the show. I'll also get you the very latest on the Post Gazette Workers, as talked about in our opening segment today. If you can believe it, folks, we literally are on the doorstep or the threshold of crossing into the 1 year mark where the workers have been, the five locals, the five different unions that make up the Post Gazette are on strike, approaching a year. And as Patrick McGill pointed out, and we've talked about in this program, and that goes back, it's a year on strike, but the conversation goes back much, much further than that. And Block Communications has one agenda here, and that is to break the union Yet the workers remain strong and remain in solidarity. We'll keep you updated on that as well, and we'll talk more about that towards the end of the show. Corey Bourbonniere is now going to follow up Patrick McGill. And Corey is joining us because Corey is a performer. He is a member of AGMA, and remember, AGMA is the American Guild of Musical Artists, and he's also a board member of AGMA, and he joins us now on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Corey, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you, man, and I appreciate you joining us in the middle of all this labor angst, Corey, and I often wonder, when you see a story about the Post Gazette and you see what those workers are going through, it makes you feel how?
It's demoralizing, I would say, as somebody that's been in a union for the last 12 years, to see the sort of union busting that's going on there. I can't believe it's been almost a year. It's disappointing. It's demoralizing. I mean, people just want to be treated fairly, and I feel like that's what unions are all about, just treating your workers fairly. So that's the least I can say about it.
I had Patrick and I in somewhere in the context of our conversation, I referenced or mentioned to Patrick that the union movement, first, there's never been a better time to be a part of a union. And second, the younger generation, I feel, is starting to understand the power of what it means to be in a union, the protection that you get from being in a union. And as you mentioned, when you first came on, you're 12 years into being a union member. Talk about that, your thoughts about what a union does, not only for you as an individual and for your colleagues, but also how it impacts all of us. It impacts the general public. It impacts the communities. It impacts the schools. Talk about that, Corey.
For sure. I feel like the movement that's going on right now, like I said, it's demoralizing. It blows. But I also feel like it's really exciting because to me it means that what I'm seeing anyway in our entertainment industry, with the auto workers, with the Post Gazette, I'm seeing people come together and stand up for what's right, for what they deserve, for respect. I came into AGMA as a 19-year-old, as so many of my peers in the ballet world do. We come into our jobs very young. And I feel like there's a lot of room for abuse there, for neglect, for people to not really understand, especially in ballet. I feel like there's a very quick shift between I'm a student and now suddenly I'm a professional, and what kinds of things you deserve being a professional, how long you've worked to get there, and the sort of treatment that you expect to see from your management. What's exciting about being in a union is that you start to feel that there's a collective behind you, that you're not just one voice by yourself, but you're one voice with this broader community that's supporting you, that's helping you get health care, that's making sure that you're not being abused, that's making sure that there's protections for people from different backgrounds. I feel like it's just a really exciting time. And like you said, there's a huge movement among the young people, especially that are tired, that have seen what their parents have gone through, that have seen what their elders have gone through, and there's no need for it, especially when you're seeing the sort of, the sort of hoarding of wealth and power at the top of a lot of these organizations, maybe less so in the arts, but out, when it comes to the WGA and SAG, when it comes to the auto workers, you're seeing a lot of hoarding at the top. And that needs to somehow get down to the membership, right? The people that are going in every day and working, and are getting exploited in a lot of cases, unfortunately. So it's cool to see. I feel like it's a great time to be a part of a union, and it really does bring us in community. I feel like, especially being a part of AGMA, we don't have any locals. Our sort of community is the broader ballet community, the broader opera community, stagehands, directors, choreographers. And it's great to be able to come together with these people from across the country, internationally, and be able to sort of share in the collective wealth of what it means to have representation behind you, of what it means to have peers in all of these different corners of the world that are sort of coming together and collaborating to really protect the workers.
Talking with Corey Bourbonniere, joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Well stated, Corey. Tell me what, from your perspective, or from the AGMA perspective, what it means to, and I referenced you as also being a board member, which means that you're involved in more than just being a union member. You are involved in what you just alluded to. You are involved in growth. You are involved in the reach down the turnpike into the city of Philadelphia and the unions that make up your organization from across the state. You have a front seat at the table to talk about or deal with issues that AGMA is facing. Can you share what that is like, or can you share an example of something that you're dealing with from a position at the front table or at the dinner table that is either working to resolution or perhaps has already worked to a resolution?
For sure. So yeah, I was elected to serve as a governor on our board. It's been 2 years now, and I've gotten to learn a lot about how our union really works. I feel like there are times where, just being within a union, within a shop, you feel a little bit siloed. But now, sort of being at I guess the top, if you will, and just getting to sort of see really how things work. It's exciting to be able to, for example, one of the things I'm really excited about is the way that we've sort of rallied around DEI provisions in our contracts, diversity, equity, inclusion. I sit on our what's called our Work Rules and Contracts Committee. We oversee all of our collective bargaining agreements, contract waivers that may come through. And one of the things that's been really exciting just in my couple of years that I've been serving is the way that we are rallying around people from diverse backgrounds, the way that we're ensuring that our members are being trained, our employers are being trained, making sure that our employees and our members have protections when it comes to discrimination and harassment. There are if any, I should say there are almost no contracts that are slipping through our cracks without making sure that we have extremely strong protections around those things. Especially in the arts, I feel like it's especially, I'll speak to what I know as ballet. It's very common for people to sort of be taken advantage of. Like I was saying earlier, we get into this art form at such a young age. So to be able to make sure that within our contract, our members know that if they're experiencing any sort of discrimination, any sort of harassment, that they'll have the right to union representation, to be heard. That's been a really exciting thing for me. And also ensuring that, again, like I said, making sure that people have equitable access to this art form. Ballet, opera, we have a history of sort of neglecting people, especially from diverse racial backgrounds. And it's great to see that we're sort of starting to shift that needle. A lot of the people that I ran with to get into the board were other Black members of our union. And it's really exciting to see not only our leadership diversify, but to see what kinds of changes we can make when there are more people that have power at that table.
Corey, one of the things that popped into my mind listening to your response is I think sometimes and I put me in with we because I don't want the public to think that I'm singling them out, but we take for granted the beauty of ballet or the incredible sound of opera. Yet we sometimes fail to realize that there is still strife inside or behind the walls of beauty. There is still angst, and there is still a need to have union protection when the show, people see the show. They don't necessarily see what goes into preparing the performance. And that's where belonging to a union, I think, is really meaningful. In your case, it's AGMA.
1,000%. And it's really great to, it's been really cool to see AGMA continue to organize throughout the country. There are a lot of regional ballet companies, opera companies that are now joining our union. Philadelphia Symphonic Choir is one of them. We just unionized at Ballet Idaho, which is really exciting. But yeah, you're right. I feel like there's been such a trope when it comes to, again, I'll speak to my own experience specifically with ballet dancers, this sort of starving artist, this sort of idea that you have to be grateful for every opportunity that you have, this idea that you have to, which there is some truth to it, but you have to look and present yourself a certain way. But those lines can really get blurred between what is expected of you as a dancer or an artist and sort of what's put upon you by directors. And I think it's really great to be able to be in a union where we can say, for example, Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, we just put into our contract protections around conversations with dancers about their weight, which has been historically an issue that many ballet dancers have had to deal with. Directors either giving them that conversation or letting them go because their weight has fluctuated. That's something that we're starting to look at and saying, there's got to be sensitivity around these kinds of conversations, and there has to be more attention given to it, specifically in the language within our CBA. So yeah, you're right. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and much of what people see is a finished product on stage, but there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into that, and it's great to be able to say that we have a collective that is uplifting each other, that's holding each other, and that is being protected by our union, by a larger body that's making sure that we are safe.
Corey Bourbonniere joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Corey, take the last 35 seconds that we have before we get to the break. And from your seat on the board of AGMA, from your position as being a union member, a union supporter, send a message out to those workers of the Post Gazette who, as we mentioned, find themselves on the doorstep or the threshold of crossing into a year of being on strike, years before October of 2022, battling for a new contract, but now on the streets, remaining in solidarity for what is about to be a year. We're about to surpass a year when we get into the month of October. So use that, if you will, to send them a message, if you don't mind.
Sure. I just want to let them know that the artists of Pittsburgh Ballet Theater stand behind you. AGMA stands behind you. I know this fight is probably really difficult, tiring, demoralizing, exhausting, but you have a lot of support, and we'll continue to fight along with you. Keep the fight up. We appreciate you.
Great stuff. Great words from Corey Bourbonniere joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. And thank you, Corey, for not correcting me if I butchered your beautiful last name as we came on to the program in the first segment. But I think I was close. Without getting clarity, Corey, I think I was close.
Definitely. I appreciate you. Thanks so much.
All right. Good stuff. That's Corey Bourbonniere joining us here. We'll get to a commercial break. Back in a moment. If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428. That's going to do it for this edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Special thanks to our two guests today, Patrick McGill and then Corey Bourbonniere, for joining us today, both from the American Guild of Musical Artists, AGMA, as we talked about on today's program, and continued support, prayers, love, and solidarity for the workers of the Post Gazette who remain on strike. Somehow, some way, we hope that ownership of the Post Gazette comes to closure and brings these incredible workers back to work. That's going to do it for Today in Pittsburgh Labor. I'm Joe Kraus. See you next time.